My name is Walter Hartwell White. I live at 308 Negra Arroyo Lane, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87104. This is my confession.
Arguably the greatest show that was ever been on television.
For making the greatest TV show ever.
And actually one of my personal favorites.
It's the greatest television show I've ever seen.
Stephen King called it one of the greatest shows of all time.
And the Emmy goes to...
And the Emmy goes to...
And the Emmy goes to Aaron Paul, Breaking Bad.
Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad.
Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad.
The Emmy award-winning stars of Breaking Bad. Please welcome Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul. Congratulations on the Emmy win last night.
Everybody has a piece of that victory, and that's what we're really happy about.
Breaking Bad is a show about what happens to somebody when they're pushed to the edge.
Walt makes these choices, and he does not have to. It's a story about a guy who is a caterpillar, and then suddenly one day he stops worrying. I thought Walter White really was a great guy. He is a guy who could have been on a Nobel Prize winning research team. At the end of the day, this has to be a show about the consequences of a really bad decision. I wanted a character who was just a very square dude. A guy who's never broken the law, who is a straight arrow guy. A very straight arrow kind of an individual.
Very straight-laced guy. I mean, he's a high school chemistry teacher.
A little excitement in your life.
The idea of a guy who's never broken the law. The character is very empathizable, sympathizable, a guy we love, a guy we rooted for.
We empathize with him because he is like us.
This guy is doing some things that are extremely detrimental to society, and it creates a tremendous amount of damage to society.
Yes. He was burdened by society.
It seems to me, in hindsight, a terrible idea for a TV show.
Right.
With a 50-year-old guy dying of cancer, cooking crystal.
Prepared.
Take me back to when you first had the idea for this.
How did you get that idea?
I was on the phone talking to a good buddy of mine. That buddy I was talking about, Tom Schnauz. Tom is arguably my oldest friend. We met in 1986 at Tisch School, the NYU Film School, many years ago. And in about 2004, we had both been on the X-Files together. He and I had written together. And that show was over, and we missed it. And At this point in time, it was about 3 years prior to this conversation, commiserating on the phone one day. I wasn't working in the moment, neither was he. Bemoaning our unemployment. He and I were bemoaning the fact that we couldn't get another really great TV job.
Were you unemployed at the time?
Very much unemployed. Truly worried about the fact that we didn't have much in the way of income coming in. And we were both thinking, Jesus, it's kind of dry out here. And
life was over.
And life was over. What are we going to do next? And we talked about being greeters at Walmart. Should we, go work at H&R Block? Because that was, maybe we could, should we dig ditches? What are we going to do? What else are we fit for? And he had read an article in the New York Times in which some children who had gotten sick had put a flab in the back of an RV from a flab that their mother had put in their bathroom and was driving around cooking. I don't know what the particulars were, but my friend Tom joked in his dark humor. He said, I think what we ought to do is if we just pool our resources and buy an RV, put a flab in the back of an RV, drive around America and drive around and make some money on the side while we're in between film jobs. And as soon as he mentioned that, it was the darndest thing. I'm not even sure where it came from. I don't know what it was, but suddenly this idea goes boom. I was intensely intrigued, became of great interest to me. It pops into my head for this character. This idea for this character who would do such a thing. What would it take for me to actually do that in real life? There's got to be a reason that would make me actually do that. And it very quickly, this character kind of came to life for me. I did not have a name for this character yet, who would do such a thing. I certainly didn't have a name for the show. Behold, this idea kind of sprung into my head. I'm going to take a very bland, milquetoast-ish guy and turn him into a bad guy, a character who became known as Walter White. I didn't know he was Walter White yet, but it dawned on me that could be a hell of a TV show. This was back in 2005, and I wanted to pursue that idea. Writing a story about a guy having the world's worst midlife crisis.
So you had an idea, then you pitched it.
It was dead. To put it bluntly, it was not going anywhere. It was not going to be a TV show. Agents sent script to AMC, and suddenly AMC comes out of nowhere. We're interested in this dead project. They wanted to make the pilot. The good folks at Sony came to me once the pilot got ordered by AMC. They made rejection a success. I just was along for the ride. The potential value of the show, saw how good it could be or how different it could be.
And not try in any way change it or soften it or put it through a filter.
They wanted to keep it as is. That was a close second as far as great jobs go to Breaking Bad. And when I named the pilot episode Breaking Bad, only then did I realize that this was a Southern regionalism and not a phrase widely. And what it means is to raise hell. No one's ever heard of it before. The executive at Sony said, "I like everything but the title. What the hell does the title mean?" But I thought everybody knew. It means to raise hell. But Breaking Bad kind of stuck nonetheless, even though I get a little bit of pressure. This character needs to be played by someone who is very arresting, has a great deal of charisma. But I think it's intriguing, the idea of breaking the law and being a bad guy. I want the bad guy to be smart, smart, smart. It seems to me that you write the things that excite you or horrify you. The idea of a guy who would do such a thing. And so when you think about it in those terms, it kind of makes sense. But there was a bit of fear on everyone's part.
It's a massive experience, emotionally and physically.
He goes from a kind of a mild-mannered guy who hasn't really taken a lot of chances and risks to a powerful, risk-taking guy who breaks to the bad side.
I mean, this show is definitely not a show for everybody.
Walter White was really the imagination of Vince Gilligan. He's genius.
That it felt like a great premise, and it felt like a great revenge fantasy, the middle-class man.
It was kind of an experimental television.
To change a character in a television series has never happened before in the history of television.
See the bad guy prevail in a TV show.
To actually allow a character to change.
We fell into it and it really absorbed us.
This is a man who still thinks of himself as a good provider and a good man.
He's willing to poison a 10-year-old kid and you're not sure who to root for?
It's always been about stasis. I couldn't find Walter White's emotional core and I was struggling.
What would Vince do? What would work on Breaking Bad?
I start at the beginning of the story and really take the time to set this character up for the audience. He turns into this multi-layered, complex, interesting, troubled, wonderful, beautiful character. I mean, he's still a bad guy.
And then all of a sudden, it hit me. It's calloused over. He doesn't even know what it is. It's a rock in his soul.
Walt, as bad a decision maker as he is, he stopped being a victim of the universe and he became a victim of himself. Walter White seems like the antithesis of a criminal and as cold and as thoughtless as he can be toward other people and hurtful to his own family of a very bad decision Walt made. You can hate his choice. There's got to be consequences. And something happened along the way. He kind of took the easy route of immersing himself in this swamp of criminality. There always had to be consequences on this show. And a lot of his decisions were based on fear of taking chances. And I think a life without fear intrigues us as well. But maybe you can kind of understand how he would come to make that choice.
The problem with Walt is that he's been teaching high school chemistry for about 25 years.
He's a guy who lived for 50 years unnoticed. This guy's a monster, and yet a human monster. There was a monster residing within that we would have never seen. The monster would have never revealed himself. There was kind of a monster underneath it all.
Darkness is throughout.
And he had to start accepting the darkness within.
So I wanted to see how dark we could take him.
I thought this was just a very dark cable comedy.
How much darker is this show going to get? It's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark show, making this guy darker and darker. He would therefore become bad.
And what Breaking Bad really was, oh, he's this guy who always had this in him.
And then the lights went out. It was dark.
This world you've created is so violent.
He's one of the world's most adept liars, and he lies first and foremost to himself. I was very fortunate to have worked with Bryan Cranston.
Bryan is a completely different person than Walt.
In other words, the show is very much about Walter White, but it's also becoming very much about Jesse Pinkman.
I was playing a character for a very long time who was just so unbelievably tortured and lonely and sad.
Whereas Jesse was a little bit the opposite.
Aaron, it's you wait to see him on screen. He can make it do anything that you write down.
Breaking Bad was a
a life-changing experience for me. The first couple seasons, I kind of just lived and breathed Jesse Pinkman.
We were going to kill off Jesse at the end of season 1.
And the rest of the writers, thank you so much for not killing me off.
You have to know where you're going.
There was such an attention to the craft and to every moment and how each moment built on each other.
Most TV shows don't get that. The show was designed, as I said before, as kind of an experiment. AMC took a chance on this show when no one else would. It was just good luck.
Breaking Bad is taking over the culture.
Oh, yeah.
It was huge.
I can say that the ending we came up with, which we've got to connect a few dots in the final episode, is something that my writers and I are very proud of. But my own mom says to me, I wish he had lived at the end. I wish he'd gotten away with it. We were kind of figuring it out as we went, as always. And I really wanted to end this thing right. I didn't want to leave some sloppy loose ends at the end.
And you realize for Walt, this is it. The final shot of the show is the camera pulling up dead Walt on the floor as the police arrive.
It's not happiness he has at the end, it's satisfaction of a final job well done.
The ending was perfect.
It is a different kind of show, isn't it? Because we'll have a very dark moment one second, then we'll have light or comedy the next.
I think that Vince Gilligan is probably one of the most brilliant writers I've ever worked with.
Breaking Bad, universally acclaimed for the finale.
It was just the perfect ending for that show.
It's kind of scary to know this is it. This is all of it. So hopefully folks will like it. It doesn't deserve happiness at the end. I think there's a certain amount of redemption.
When I was reading this last episode, what my real purpose was.
Because all the bad things he's done, I think, in my way of thinking, he doesn't completely think he deserves happiness, but there is a fulfillment of some kind. But we knew we needed to dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
Like we couldn't wrap the story up in that 16, but 16 turned out to be just right.
We want to see him redeem himself, and that's where the ending comes from.
It was a perfect opportunity for all of us. It changed all of our lives.
Playing Jesse Pinkman was a once-in-a-lifetime role.
No, this is the greatest role of my life. I know that I will never have another role as good as Walter White.
Creating stories in the first place, stories that work out with some sort of sense of justice.